Good afternoon, Chris. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Martin. Great, thanks. How are you? It's
I'm
good
doing
to see you.
fine. Yeah, it's good to see you again as well. I'm doing actually fine. A little bit of a weird time right now, but
Yeah.
other than that, everything is actually pretty fine. I want to talk to you about what we did for you and the company you work for.
Mhm.
But before we dive into that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and about the company that you work for?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Christopher Sparks. I'm an American living in the south of the Netherlands, and I work for a company called Brightlands, which shares my passion for, I hate to use the word unlock, but sort of unlocking the potential of regions. Um, what we do at Brightlands is we have innovation campuses in different areas set up around the province. So the province of Limburg. There's one campus that focuses on agri-food and supply chain innovations in Venlo. So that's very north in the province. There's one in Sittard Geleen on a massive chemical campus called Chemelot. They focus um, on smart materials and anything basically chemistry oriented innovations. There's a health and medicine campus in Maastricht that does medical innovations. And what we do in Heerlen in the south of Limburg is digital transformation, digital innovations, things like blockchain, AI, clean tech, cyclical economies, basically anything that uses data also to optimize the human experience.
Cool.
And what I'm passionate about is really uh, being the boots on the ground person that helps startups and small business people actually build themselves into that narrative. So how do we push a region forward and build things in the region to make the world a better place? And I like to be the person that helps the smaller people,
Sounds
not the
great.
huge corporations.
Sounds great. You also studied like entrepreneurship in and innovation in university, right?
Yeah, so I had a small business in the U.S. for 7 years, and then I really kind of, to be completely blunt, I wanted to see what life was like in Europe as maybe a bit of an insurance policy
Hmm.
against certain trends that I was noticing in the U.S. around 2010. So I decided to go for a master's at the University of Maastricht. I studied international business with a small focus on entrepreneurship. Of course, reading a paper and trying and saying that you understand entrepreneurship is not something that doesn't exist. You actually have to practice it.
Hmm.
So I took some of my knowledge from my small business ownership experience and put it towards that education. But it wasn't really until I think I started working with Brightlands that the real what that really means, sort of small business ownership and entrepreneurship. That's really sort of the main learning process
Cool.
in my life.
And let's go back in time. What were you doing before you started working with us, like with BW Ventures?
So I myself came on as the head of entrepreneurial development at the Brightlands Smart Services campus. Now, when you talk about a large government-funded organization with primarily corporate-minded people in a campus,
Hmm.
what you have is sometimes a misunderstanding of what an ecosystem with real entrepreneurial and startup methodologies. There can be a huge difference in understanding of what it actually needs to be and what they build. My job was to, as the head of entrepreneurial development, figure out what was happening in the current solution that we had for building entrepreneurs and startups at the campus, and what we actually needed to move forward and actually have some results coming out of our campus startup demographic. Um, what we were doing before we met BW Ventures as the Brightline Smart Services campus was we were working with another supplier of these services, running essentially an incubator. Just from my very, I guess, nascent knowledge at the time,
Hmm.
one could tell pretty quickly that things weren't working the way that the founder needed them to work to be a successful founder of a successful startup. The first thing that was blatantly obvious to me was that the contracts were extremely unfair.
Hmm.
And then the second thing that stood out heavily was the methodologies were nothing more than a dozen and a half of mediocre workshops that had zero red line running through them. That's what Germans say when there's no consistency in the content that was being provided. Zero strategy, zero real planning. It was sort of a collection of the usual suspects in innovation theater. So, oh yeah, that's business model canvas. Great, that's awesome. We should have a workshop of that on the first week of the incubator. And I had already known that this is not the way that this stuff works. You actually have to do a much more involved investigation of the market before you go ahead and start investing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of euros into building an ecosystem or an incubator or accelerator.
Yeah, like what were you what was your desired outcome, of before you started working with us? What were you looking for? What were you trying to solve?
I was trying to solve the first thing had to be the understanding of the region and what it really takes. So there's a difference between places like Limburg and places like Amsterdam, where the willingness of a leader of industry in a place like Limburg to literally take the hand of a startup as the CEO of a large multinational corporation, taking the hand of the startup and leading them to the customer that they need and making that introduction happens a lot more in larger cities than it does here. But that's because I have a strong feeling that people in regions like Limburg just don't understand the necessity of that. You have to pay it forward when it comes to startups and startup founders. The other thing that I really wanted to do was get people to work together on a better solution to the problem of startup incubation. And I had known that BW had been getting amazing results, and that the people working there had what I say is very high value stock. So if you could buy stock in an individual at an early stage, that was how I had seen BW Ventures from a previous role that I had in Utrecht, is that we should start working with these people because, they do this in a way that I know is the right way to do it. And what I mean is just all of the management and strategy behind an incubator and or accelerator.
Yeah, because a great bridge for me. But what were the results that you achieved by working with us, and how did it really fix the problems that you were trying to solve yourself for the Brightland Smart Services Campus?
Right. So the results that we got with BW Ventures was a heavy professionalization of the process that we needed. There was a lot of, to use your words on this, innovation theater happening almost everywhere in the ecosystem when it came to startups, and none of that actually pays off. What it does is it extends the date of realization when everybody in the ecosystem realizes that it's a city built on sand. You need to have scalability as quickly as possible. And there's no replacement for sales, LOIs, and pre-sales. And I really wanted to see a results-driven ecosystem because it just didn't exist. But there were people that were fully confident in lying about the fact that it did exist. So they were telling the politicians, the shareholders, everyone, we're doing a great job. I mean, look at how many startups we have. We've got, they just got this subsidy and they've got 300,000 in grant funding from the local industry bank. And that's not a startup. That's a subsidized project. And the difference between that and the lack of understanding that people have in a region is extremely concerning, because how much money actually goes into these projects. You need to have the backbone and you need to have the foundation to go ahead and do the real practical, results-driven programs. Not this, it's cute, we've got 50 startups. You need to have performing startups that have actual customers.
Yeah, and
I get very emotional about this because I know how much has gone into these expectations, and that it's feeding this sort of narrative that everything's fine. It's not.
No, it's not. And what do you think BW Ventures contributed in that whole area? Was it only the strategy and putting all the right elements in place, or was it also execution? What did we contribute in your view to that?
Well, the mere fact that so many LOIs were signed for the startups when they went through the Prexler is quantitative data that, you could trust my word. I love I love that the program worked as well as it did, and that it made us all look quite professional and intelligent and results driven. But the LOIs and the attention that the startups were getting from actual customers, not just in the region, but all across Europe, was extremely indicative of the effectiveness of the program. The other thing that it did, and these are not my words either, this is from a local banker, is that thank God somebody came in and did something about this now and actually put up a program that is worth its weight. You guys are working with people who really know what they're doing, was that's the paraphrase of what this person said.
Thanks.
That somebody needed to come forward and really show the region that there's a better global best practices way to roll out an incubator and an acceleration program. Yeah, and not just perpetuate this false narrative of innovation when it's only just a theater.
And what do you think, if you summarize that, what would be the biggest impact of working with us?
The biggest impact is now that hundreds of millions of euro innovation fund for a region now understands that it needs to do something differently when it comes to startup innovation. So there's although people don't talk about it publicly, I mean, there's an understanding that things need to look more like they look in a place like Boulder, Colorado, than a series of workshops. So that's also like coming from my heart. What was more practically, what was a more practical result is that people were looking at the startups coming out of the program and saying, holy shit, these are winners. And these are people that understand that startup innovation is not just a shot in the dark, load the bird shot into the shotgun and fire into the sky and hope that you hit something, that there's a smarter way to actually go about getting early stage traction and building validation into the DNA of the startup. So not just cold calling 300 people and hoping that you get 2 customers out of it. No. But this is also like a problem, I think, in a lot of innovation programs at corporates as well, because somebody comes along, has a friend in the corporate or is an amazing salesperson, and then they convince someone in the corporate that this is a program that they should be going with. And it's somebody who calls themselves a growth hacker or a lean expert. And they're good at talking, but not necessarily good at getting the results that need to come out of it.
Yeah, and so we both understand that not every startup is going to be successful during such a program. That's not what we claim as well. But
right.
Do you think, what would be the impact for the startups that didn't make it to a next phase, and how do you think that helped you in your position? Our process, our way of working.
So the startups that didn't make it. What was good about that is that. Also, one of the things that kind of makes me sick about these innovation theaters is that you extend the expectations of the founders who have really bad ideas or that are themselves unable to validate the idea, and thus will never have a successful startup in that market or with that idea. And what it does is it says, the market doesn't want this, and it's okay. There's something else in the world for you to do, but this particular evidence that we have right in front of you is that this is not the way to go for the next 6 to 7 years of your life. It's going to end up with tears and a lot of debt. What it does for investors is it allows them to double down on the things that work. So it's sort of like pruning a tree when it comes to what group of startups do I need to have. You want to double down on the ones that work really well, and you don't want to lead people on just for the sake of impressing, politicians. We have 50 startups. Well, how many of those startups are successful? You should rather have 25 successful startups than inflated numbers in your portfolio.
that completely aligns with my vision on this whole subject. But let's go back again. Like, where did you hear about us the first time, and what especially piqued your interest, basically to reconnect with me?
Yeah, so we met. We met in 2015 when I was working with another business partner on entrepreneurial programs for corporates. In Utrecht, and sort of you particularly, the encyclopedic knowledge that you had on the subject of startup innovation was impressive to begin with, but the problems that we were having at Brightlands in 2018 were, I started looking around sort of in the world of like, what is the solution to this? And then there was a lot of different options of programs so the reason why I reconnected with you was because of this necessity, not just because you're a cool guy. The necessity for a solution where you can go to there's a lot of different options out there where it's like, I think like the Silicon Valley way of doing it is like hire a sales team, and then they're just going to annoy the hell out of every lead that they have and try to convert them. So the heavy marketing side, then there's the growth hacking marketing people who can run your accelerator or incubator, which is a little bit better in a European context. And then there's people who really run sort of portfolio volume portfolio startup equity holding schemes. And having known you from before, and also kind of like watching your star rise a little bit, I knew that that the solution wasn't going to be, and I can't say the names of the companies that were the other options, but there's a lot of them in Amsterdam. It wasn't going to be those solutions. It wasn't going to be someone who wasn't going to get their hands dirty with the design of the program and understanding the structure that we have as Brightlands. That was you in the end. So when we ended up working together, the way that I saw it was that we were also investing in you as a rising star to kind of work together to build a real startup ecosystem.
Thank you.
And it's good to see that that's still happening.
Thanks. And what was for you the deciding trigger? You know, what really pulled the trigger to start working with us?
It was a match, really. So it wasn't. Let me think of the best way to say that. What was the specific trigger? Was the way that BW Ventures has adapted what works in areas like Boulder, Colorado with Techstars, and in a lot of really impressive accelerators in California, to a European context. So of course the knowledge is there, the well-rounded program is there, both of which a lot of incubator companies that run incubators and accelerators do not have. So those two things are there already. But taking the best practices from contexts where Boulder and California, where those things have been proven to work, and then adapting them for a European context where the money is not flowing through the sewers and you can't just reach into someone's bank account and take out 100K. That's what really was important, because you can also try to go for like the biggest, best machine that has the most well-known reputation. But that doesn't mean that it's going to work for the region that you are sitting in. And all the companies in the region don't want to see overfunded startups that come out of things like Y Combinator, who are too cocky for their own britches. So it was essentially the best practices that you employ mixed with your ability to adapt them properly for a European market.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I never knew you thought about it like this and this way, but great answer, thanks. And how likely are you to recommend us to any other?
I recommend every time I talk to somebody, if they need anything to do with startups, it's go to Martin.
Thanks.
Period.
How likely are you to recommend us to others?
So the I recommend you to people like almost on a weekly basis. I'll put it that way. So, yeah, when it comes to, I'd say it's a 10 out of 10 in terms of when I recommend you, because there are still these other programs happening. There's always questions like how do we start a healthy startup portfolio in our corporate. There's plenty of corporate innovators running around Brightlands, not just on our campus but others. And the recommendation that I always have is go talk to Martin, and he has everything from building your startup strategy into your core business strategy to much more hands-off services that BW Ventures provides.
Thanks. And why do you think someone that is watching this video should take action right now?
Because I said so. No.
No.
No, I think you should take action because BW Ventures, Martin, Case, Flores, etc., everybody involved there really understands on a human level, but also on a very holistic, strategic level, what's important and what's not. And a lot of other companies will try, a lot of other startup incubation services will try to sell you on things that are a lot easier for them to deliver, but get no results in the long run. And by the time you realize that you've bought a bad product, they've already collected their check, and they're out the door already. And you end up with a 0 results startup portfolio, and yeah, you look silly in front of your supervisor or your CEO.
Yeah, probably in the long run. But
so it's basically this is a no bullshit results oriented program, and it's one of the only ones that I know of. But it is the best one that works. The best one that works in a European context.
Thanks. Well, thanks a lot.
I can also back that up a little bit more with there's a huge misinterpretation of expectations for startups and incubation and acceleration people, because all of the content that they're reading is coming from places in the US or in Singapore where financial capital is way more available than it is in Europe. So they have all these expectations that you need huge investments and you need to hire a sales team immediately, but they're not realizing that this person who wrote this blog article is sitting in San Francisco writing sitting on a pile of cash. It's not the same in Europe as it is in the US. So yeah, that's why somebody should go with BW.
Thanks a lot, Chris, for this interview.